The morning the planes trembled, St. Lo, July 25, 1944. July 25, 1944. 6:03, a fog-thick field 2 miles east of St. Lo, Normandy, the air tastes of diesel and cold metal. You arrive in the world through sound first, a low, mechanical thunder that rolls across hedgerows and rattles windows in shell-blasted farmhouses. It comes in waves, a convoy of armored hulks moving like a metal tide. The lead vehicle is an M4 Sherman, its cast hull bowed in the morning haze, turret head down as if squinting through the fog. Sergeant Thomas Mac McGarry, 31 and squared by 100 scrubbed dawns, sits with his chin on the edge of the escape hatch, canvas helmet straps knotted under his jaw, eyes narrowed against the spray of road grit. He tastes oil on his lips and the thin metallic tang of fear that never quite leaves a man who pilots tons of killing metal. The Sherman exhales in a cough of white from its exhaust, the R-975 radial or V-8 rumble swallowed into hedgerow shadows. Its 75mm gun hunkers in the turret like a blunt fist, a coaxial .30 cal stutters in idle. Crewman, a loader, a driver with grease-black palms, a gunner whose face carries the small scars of previous scraps, move like a small village at war inside a tight metal cathedral. An inch of condensation sits on the viewports. The tank's bogies groan over the churned ground, each link telling a history of miles and repair patches. Behind them, row after row of Shermans file through gaps in the bocage, engines coughing, tracks hissing mud and chain grease. From the German dugout a few kilometers away, the morning report is blunt and practiced, Allied armor massing east of St. Lo. In a prim command post, maps taped under flickering lamps show arrows and counters. Field Marshal Gunther von Kluge's staff hear the words with a cadence that implies calculation rather than shock, yet there is noise in the wire beyond the map room. Radio intercepts, reconnaissance photos, frightened village reports, they all begin to sing the same note, thousands of tanks, not the few specters of Panthers and Tigers the German command prized, but a rolling ocean of Shermans. On paper this is a toy, in the mud at dawn it feels heavy and insistent. The nickname, Tommy, or Ronson, rides the lips of many a German crew. The Sherman was mocked in German memoirs as an undergunned, flammable little thing that could not face a Panther in a one-on-one duel. But that mocking belongs to doctrine and to the heat of expectation. Here, in the bocage, doctrine collides with logistics and attrition. The Germans had counted on armor quality to offset Allied quantity, on a few big, perfectly placed punches to stall the invasion. They had not counted on reliability, on numbers replaced faster than a duel could exhaust them, or on the way that 1,000 small, maintainable machines could remake a battlefield. Sergeant McGarry hears the first whistle, not friend or foe but the high, distant beat of P-47 Thunderbolts running a strafing pattern over the next ridge. The sky is busy with American airpower, fighter bombers that make a low, angry voice across the valley. When the tanks reach the hedgerows the air kicks up into a wall of noise, the Thunderbolts make the horizon a strip of motion, and the Sherman crews look up and nod with something near reverence. The aircraft don't just scream overhead, they lift weight off the ground. Their bombs and rockets open German positions so Shermans can push through with comparatively less cost. McGarry watches a flame-licked hut on the right go black and collapse under a P-47 rocket strike. German infantry in a shallow trench try to drag away a machine gun crew, but tracers and smoke make the effort a panic. The Shermans don't wait for perfect lines. They hammer the gaps punched open by bombs and climb hedgerows at angles that make engineers mutter. Their suspension, simple and well understood in American depots and field shops, can be repaired often and quickly. A radioed order moves down the line, push through. Follow the markers. It is not a command of romantic daring, it is a command of logistics and momentum. A German Panther, when it appears, rare, heavy, a hand grenade of a machine with a long, capable gun, is a nightmare in close quarters. It awaits in ambush in a ruined farmyard, tracks dug, gun masked. The Panther's 75mm high-velocity gun can eat a Sherman at 2,000 yards, an unequal duel is certain. But the hunter's advantage is temporary. American tactics here are not about single duels. They are about shock, depth, and attrition. A Sherman knocks loose a hedge, another throws smoke, 3 Shermans sweep around, a P-47 roars past to stir the air into panic, half a company of infantry steps in with bazookas and small, devastating bursts that find a side plate or soft underbelly. Where the Germans had expected to trade quality for quantity, they find themselves trading metal and crews piece by piece until manpower and fuel run thin. Within hours the command post that once held confident lines begins to hum with a different sound, the sound of messages asking for armor reinforcements, for fuel, for clarification of a front that is no longer a line but a mosaic of shattered hedgerows and impromptu roadblocks. Officers in German caps scrawl frantic notations across maps. General staff faces, lined and hard, show a dawning recognition that modern war is not won only by technical superiority. It is won by maintenance, by factories that keep the steel coming, by radios that keep men talking, and by air support that turns ground advantage into a rout. Back in the Sherman turret, McGarry squeezes a breath through his teeth as his gunner calls target, a silhouette of a tank driver peering out, as if to see who has come to take his field. McGarry does not think of doctrine. He thinks of the next meal, of oil for the pump, of the gunner's steady hand. He thinks of the simple fact that today his tank runs and the German one burns. He pulls the trigger and watches the shell strike. It is not elegance or one majestic blow that wins the morning but 1,000 small, replaceable successes, 100 tanks pushing where one great tank cannot stand alone. The toys had come in 1,000 strong. The Reich had expected monsters, not a machine that could be patched quickly, refueled at the roadside, and sent forward again and again. The morning fog lifts, the plains tremble with a new kind of certainty. By the summer of 1944, German command clung to a myth, the idea that battlefield dominance came from engineering genius alone. In every briefing, men like Heinz Guderian and Albert Speer spoke with pride of precision, of steel milled to perfection in factories that smelled of oil and ambition. They built monsters, the Tiger I, the Panther, machines that embodied German industrial artistry, tall, sleek, and terrifying. But artistry doesn't feed an army. And by that same summer, Allied supply lines were feeding Europe with something more powerful than a perfect gun: numbers. At a tank depot outside Cherbourg, U.S. engineers in sweat-stained coveralls walked between rows of Shermans under the open sky. Each machine looked roughly the same, olive drab, utilitarian, unromantic, but every part was designed for interchangeability. A burned-out transmission? Replace it in hours. A cracked road wheel? Swap it from the next truckload. The Shermans didn't demand miracles from their crews, they asked for wrenches, gasoline, and grit. In Berlin, German officers still scoffed. A Sherman cannot duel a tiger, one report mocked. It is like a tin can attacking a lion. Yet, by autumn, every tiger lost in Normandy had taken days to recover, if fuel or spare parts even existed. The Sherman, meanwhile, was never alone. Each one was a single cell in a much larger organism, linked to air reconnaissance, artillery spotting, logistics, and field radios that never seemed to go quiet. In a smoky tavern turn command post near Falaise, a weary panzer major unrolled his maps. His last Panther sat broken 2 kilometers back, clutch burned out, gun jammed. Around him, his crewmen argued in low, bitter voices. They weren't afraid of the Shermans individually, they were afraid of how many kept coming. "You kill one," muttered the driver, "and 2 more come around the side." He wasn't exaggerating. That was the heart of Allied doctrine: combined arms, overwhelming coordination, and relentless logistics. When a Sherman was hit, 3 things happened almost immediately: recovery teams marked its position, artillery covered its withdrawal, and air patrols circled to strike back. The Americans treated armor as renewable. To German tankers, each lost machine was a wound that never healed. On August 7, 1944, during Operation Luttich, Hitler himself demanded a counterattack near Mortain, an attempt to cut off the Allied advance with what armor still remained. Over 200 German tanks and assault guns moved through fog and farmland, aiming to punch a hole back to the coast. The Tiger battalions rolled forward, their engines roaring like an orchestra of fury. But the fog lifted too soon. Above the columns came the shriek of engines, P-47 Thunderbolts, Tempests, Typhoons, the new hunters of armor. Shermans on the ground halted and withdrew into cover, radioing coordinates. Within minutes, the sky itself became artillery. Rockets and 500-pound bombs fell across the German line. The invincible counterattack became a slaughter. Burned Tigers littered the road, their long barrels drooping like melted candles. Survivors crawled from hatches, coughing black smoke, watching the supposed toy tanks creep back onto the field, methodical, unbroken. To Allied soldiers, this wasn't luck, it was a system. The Sherman didn't need to win duels, it needed to survive, communicate, and let the broader machine of war do the killing. Meanwhile, in the Reich Chancellery, reports piled up faster than explanations. German generals began writing in code to one another, "We are losing the battle of engines." It wasn't a complaint about quality, but of scale. The Allies could lose 5 Shermans for every Tiger and still come out ahead, and they often didn't lose that many. For every Panther destroyed, 2 more Shermans rolled off ships in Cherbourg, Southampton, or Naples. The factories back home, in Detroit, in Cleveland, in Pittsburgh, were the real front line. Conveyor belts moved faster than the German war machine could react. For every part the Reich struggled to forge, the Americans stamped out 10. By late 1944, Sherman variants filled the continent, some with the new 76mm guns, others converted to bulldozers, flamethrowers, or bridge layers. It was no longer just a tank. It was an ecosystem. In late September, near Aachen, a Panther commander named Oberleutnant Ernst Becker recorded in his journal, "They come at us as if they have no end. You destroy one, and by afternoon, there are 6 more. They are not brave, they are not cowards. They are machines of an empire that does not sleep." His words would later appear in Allied intelligence briefings as evidence of German fatigue. But to the men in the field, it was a confession of something deeper, that the age of mechanical mastery had given way to the age of mass production. By winter, the shock had settled into resignation. The Tiger's reputation, so carefully nurtured by propaganda, could not survive the arithmetic. When Operation Cobra finally broke the German line, the fields of Normandy were littered with the proof: burnt Tigers, overturned half-tracks, and endless rows of Shermans pushing toward Paris. The toy had become the tide. The generals who once laughed at it now whispered about it in disbelief. The tank they mocked for its simplicity had done what no masterpiece of engineering could: it had made victory inevitable. The machine that wouldn't stop, the Sherman crosses Europe. December 17, 1944. The Ardennes. Snow drifts against the sides of a narrow forest road as the muffled growl of engines echoes through the trees. The M4 Shermans advance slowly, paint dulled by frost, whitewashed to blend with the winter landscape. Exhaust fumes mix with frozen mist, rising like ghostly breath from an army of machines. Inside one of them, Lieutenant Robert Keane checks his map by the dim red glow of a dash lamp. His gloves are stiff, his breath clouds against the steel walls. Outside, the cold bites deep enough to make even metal groan. Suddenly, the stillness shatters. A shell crashes into the tree lean ahead, showering snow and bark across the lead tank. The crew flinches, they've seen this before. It's the German counteroffensive, the Battle of the Bulge, and the enemy is throwing every last Panther, Tiger, and Königstiger they have into one desperate strike. The Ardennes forests erupt in thunder. Keane's gunner, a kid barely 20, spots movement through the periscope, a long, flat silhouette, low to the ground. "Panther, 11 o'clock, he shouts. The 75mm gun traverses, its gears whining. The Sherman fires first, but the shell ricochets off the Panther's angled armor like a slap on a shield. The German tank returns fire, and misses. There's no time to think. Keane yells into the radio, "Flank right. Smoke cover, now." 2 Shermans on the ridge launch smoke rounds, obscuring the view. Keane's tank lurches forward through the fog, snow crunching under tracks. The gunner steadies, adjusts elevation, and fires again, this time at the Panther's exposed side. The round hits. A jet of flame bursts from the German turret ring. The Sherman crew doesn't cheer. They just move. There are always more. That was the lesson the Allies had learned by now: never fight fair. Never duel where the enemy is strongest. Use numbers, coordination, and movement. Every Sherman was a single heartbeat in a much larger organism, supported by artillery, aircraft, engineers, and endless supplies that followed behind them like a second wave. In war rooms across Germany, the reports grew darker. Luftwaffe reconnaissance planes returned with photographs showing columns of tanks stretching from horizon to horizon, thousands of Shermans moving east through Belgium, Luxembourg, and northern France. They were everywhere, crossing rivers, cresting hills, rumbling through bombed-out villages. What shocked German commanders most wasn't their firepower, it was that they never seemed to stop. When the Tiger tanks broke down, they sat and waited for parts that might never come. When a Sherman broke down, it was repaired within hours or replaced entirely. U.S. supply trucks followed at a pace unheard of in the Wehrmacht, mechanics riding with spare engines, tracks, and gearboxes, sometimes fixing tanks in the middle of open fields under artillery fire. War had become a contest of endurance, not elegance. By March 1945, that endurance reached the Rhine. Bridges that German engineers had sworn were impossible to seize now fell one by one to advancing Allied armor. At Remagen, Shermans rumbled across the Ludendorff Bridge under fire, the first tanks to cross into Germany itself. The Rhine, once Hitler's proud, impregnable boundary, echoed with the grinding chains of American steel. From the eastern sky, thunderbolts and mustangs screamed overhead. The partnership that had begun in the hedgerows of Normandy was now perfected, air and ground moving as one. Shermans marked targets with smoke shells, aircraft dove seconds later to obliterate whatever stood ahead. Towns that once bristled with anti-tank guns were cleared street by street. And as the Allies advanced, civilians watched from shattered windows, bewildered at the sheer number of olive drab machines crawling across the horizon. German propaganda had told them the Shermans were crude and inferior. Yet here they were, thousands of them, engines humming, guns level, flags painted on hulls. The toy had grown into a rolling wall of inevitability. In April 1945, outside Magdeburg, a captured German colonel stood beside a burning Panther as Allied soldiers questioned him. His eyes moved from the wreck to the endless column of Shermans behind it, hundreds, maybe more, snaking through the valley. He shook his head slowly and said in broken English, "You did not build tanks, you built factories that move." That line would echo through the debriefing rooms of Allied intelligence, a rare moment of raw honesty from a man who had watched his country's most fearsome weapons become irrelevant. Because in the end, the Sherman's greatest weapon wasn't its gun. It was momentum. Back in one of those tanks, Lieutenant Keane leaned against the turret and looked east as the sun set behind the smoke. They'd crossed France, Belgium, Luxembourg, and now stood in the heart of Germany. Around him, Shermans idled, mud-caked, dented, but alive. The crews barely spoke anymore. They didn't need to. Every man knew they had ridden the machine that turned the tide. For all its flaws, the Sherman had done what no single masterpiece could, it had overwhelmed an empire through persistence, adaptability, and sheer will. And as the last light of day caught the scorched barrel of a Tiger in the field below, Keane realized what so many German generals now understood. Victory wasn't born in one perfect design. It was forged by thousands of imperfect ones that never stopped coming. The reckoning, when the generals finally understood, May 1945. Berlin. The city burns like a furnace swallowing itself. Rubble chokes the boulevards once lined with banners and statues. In the underground command bunker, the air is thick with smoke, sweat, and a silence no one dares break. Maps lie scattered on the concrete table, the lines once proud and confident now erased beneath smudges of ash and trembling hands. In the corner, General Alfred Jodl stands staring at the latest field reports. The words are almost surreal now. Sherman units have reached the Elbe. Allied armor sighted south of Hamburg. No remaining reserves available. Across the ruined city, the sound of engines rolls like thunder. The Shermans, those toys, those death traps that German officers once laughed at, are now crawling through the outskirts, their silhouettes flickering in the firelight. Civilians peer out from basements, seeing not the knights of some romantic mechanized order, but hundreds of rugged, battered machines grinding through a city that once believed itself untouchable. In the days before the collapse, captured German officers began to talk more freely, their arrogance eroded by exhaustion. One of them, General der Panzertruppe Fritz Bayerlein, who had commanded at Villers-Bocage and later in the Ardennes, admitted quietly to an American interrogator, "We never believed your tank could last in a real fight. But you had more tanks than we had bullets." He wasn't exaggerating. The statistics told the story better than any boast could. Germany had built roughly 6,000 Panthers and a little over 1,300 Tigers in the entire war. The United States had produced nearly 50,000 Shermans, and then upgraded, replaced, and modified them faster than the Reich could comprehend. Each destroyed tank was already accounted for before the smoke had cleared. The German generals had fought the last war, the one where a single decisive machine could rule a battlefield. The Allies fought the next one, where factories, fuel convoys, and air cover were the new artillery of empire. On April 21, 1945, as Soviet forces closed in from the east, a small American armored column halted outside Magdeburg. The lead Sherman, its hull painted with the name Betty Lou, stood idling beside the wreck of a German Tiger II. The King Tiger was a monument to wasted brilliance, its enormous guns still gleamed in the weak sunlight, but its engine deck was split open, gears twisted, treads torn off in retreat. A corporal climbed atop it and peered inside. The smell was a mix of burnt oil and cordite. The controls were elegant, almost delicate, compared to the crude steel and bolts of his own Sherman. He spat on the ground and muttered, "Hell of a tank. Shame it couldn't get anywhere." That single comment, crude, offhand, and weary, summed up the reality that generals in Berlin were now forced to accept. In post-war interrogations, historians and Allied analysts asked Germany's surviving tank commanders what they thought had doomed them. The answers were rarely about bravery or strategy. They were about logistics. "We had to choose between fuel for tanks or food for men," one said. "Our engines froze. Our transmissions failed. We had no replacements," said another. And then the most telling, "They fought like they had an endless army of machines. We fought like every tank was a relic to be saved." It wasn't just the tanks that overwhelmed them. It was the entire American method, the ability to mobilize a continent, to synchronize steel, oil, and manpower into one unstoppable rhythm. The Sherman wasn't perfect. It wasn't glamorous. But it was the physical expression of a nation's momentum. By the time the German High Command finally surrendered, the Sherman had rolled across Africa, Italy, France, Belgium, Holland, Germany, and the Pacific. It had faced Tigers, Panthers, Stooges, and 88s, and outlasted them all. And as the guns fell silent, German officers who once sneered at its bent barrel and weak armor could only stare at the evidence. The Sherman had done what the Reich's most formidable weapons could not, it had won everywhere. A few weeks later, in a dusty field near Nuremberg, a group of American tank crews parked their Shermans in a long, quiet row. The men climbed out, laughing tiredly, leaning against the still warm hulls. They didn't see themselves as heroes. They saw themselves as survivors, part of a machine larger than any one of them. One of them, a mechanic from Ohio, took off his helmet and ran a hand along the scarred armor plate of his tank. Someone had scrawled a name in chalk across it months earlier, "The toy that took Berlin." He chuckled under his breath, not realizing that somewhere beneath the rubble of the city, a German general had used almost the same words, not in mockery this time, but in disbelief. The toy conquered the Reich. The M4 Sherman was never the best tank in the world. But it was the right one, at the right time, for the right army, in the right kind of war. Its strength wasn't its gun or armor. Its strength was the system that stood behind it, a nation's will turned into steel, gasoline, and motion. And when that machine began to move, even the greatest generals in history could only stand and watch it roll past, realizing too late what they were truly fighting against.